Mm. Sahanam Vavatu Sahanam Punaktu Shanti. Can you all hear me?
Hari Om, ma'am. Yes, we can now.
Okay, thank
We couldn't hear the prayer. I couldn't hear the prayer.
you. Oh, okay. Something seems to be wrong with the connection today. Okay, so what we have been studying is renunciation, and
Hari Om, ma'am. Before we start, I have a question pertaining to the topic. Can I ask?
yeah, please.
Ma'am, thank you so much for this topic, first of all, because it cleared so many doubts. I had a different understanding of renunciation, and now it is completely clear. But still, I have one doubt between Rajasic renunciation and Sattvic renunciation. So you gave two wonderful examples. Like one student came to you and asked that he is doing his business and he's feeling slightly bored or he's feeling disturbed, and you asked him to move to the next level. Now, what I see here that if he moves to the next level, a lot of people want to start farmhouses, want to get into different situations, and they lose everything. So this whole thing of moving to the next level, I am very much confused because there is a possibility that you might lose what is there with you. So that is question one. Second one, you gave an example of one person who, after I think a long period of marriage, is staying separately with his wife, and they are having a good relationship. I feel that is an intellect-driven activity uh, where both are peaceful and both can pursue whatever they want. But you said it marriage results in growth. So like that, we can take many things that can result in growth. We can have a child, we can go on a solo trip. Many things people say, right, with regard to growth. So I'm confused here.
Okay, so let's go step by step. The first question is, why can't I see you? Okay. Now, um, first question was that we should move to the next level, but in doing so, we may lose what we already have. That was your question. So how do you know whether you should do it or not? Okay, so we do that by understanding what does it mean to move to the next level. Next level of what? When we're talking in the context of our class here, we're talking of the next level of unselfishness. So the more you're able to push that up a little, it's not about changing from working at Swiggy to buying a farmhouse, but how can I be more unselfish in what I am doing? And once we figure this thing out, automatically growth takes place. When I say growth now, I mean spiritual growth as well as material growth. Okay, so why is Modi the prime minister of our country? Because he thinks in terms of the country. Okay, in anyone who thinks in terms of something is in charge of that thing. Like a house homemaker, she her sort of she rules the house, she rules the roost. Why does she? because she thinks in terms of the house all the time. She always thinks in terms of the home. That's why everybody has to listen to her. I know so many men, they say to me, they're very funny. They say, we do everything for the kids, but the kids listen to the mother only. They talk like that. Why do the kids listen to the mother? Because her whole thinking is from that perspective. So what she says is the law. So moving to the next level means becoming more unselfish in the role. The role changes when you become more unselfish. Okay? Like if you think in terms of the company, you will start running the company because you're thinking in terms of.
Understood. Understood, man.
Okay. Then second point was that all these various things, going on a solo trip or whatever, gives you growth. I don't know whether it gives you growth or not. That is, of course, depends on what you did on that solo trip. But marriage is a very peculiar thing in giving you growth. What is peculiar about it is that you allow somebody into your personal space, and that person gets a right to have an opinion. And it's very irritating. Like, why do you have an opinion on what I do? You just go jump. You feel like saying that. But you can't because you have engaged in this thing. Now, what forces you at that point is you cannot afford to function on your own likes and dislikes because there's always somebody going to be impacted by it. So you're forced to not function on likes and dislikes. You're forced. Like, in the joint families in the past, you may have liked many things, but there were other 50 other people. You're forced to adjust, negotiate, reconcile, sacrifice. You're forced to do something. Fight also if you want, but you're forced. So that's very peculiar about these family circumstances. They force you to conquer your likes and dislikes. If you're doing it properly. If you're not doing it properly, you will sort of there's a man and a woman. The man wants to live a frugal life. The woman wants to buy a car, right? Now she can't buy a car and he can't live a frugal life. They'll have to figure out because they have to do this together somehow. So they have to figure out. They'll have to figure out how are they going to manage this affair. Otherwise, it becomes more and more weird. They can't go together anywhere. Like one will be dressed like I don't know, like a roadside beggar, and one is dressed like a Maharani. Can't work like that, right? So you're forced. I mean, you're forced because if you don't do it, there'll be extreme agitation in your circumstance. So you're forced.
So
So
you take this.
that's what makes the growth.
So you take this decision. Uh, so you have to go with it.
You've taken the decision to get married, and you are currently taking the decision to stay married. In which case, you have to accommodate whatever the other person is saying.
So that's very curious, man. I'm not looking from a person's perspective. That person who lived separately, uh, and they are happy. So if they are happy and it is working, so there is a good decision taken, right? Whereas you had a different.
No, because they are happy because their likes and dislikes are now being catered to. Now it's like friends with benefits. I mean, you're arranging your life so that I will get all the advantages and none of the disadvantages. And that seems like a very sensible thing to do. But what you are doing is exaggerating your own likes and dislikes. You will find it impossible to live with anyone, and the result will be one day you'll find it impossible to live by yourself also. Now you'll say, no, 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 you're exaggerating. I'm not. You look at stats. In the Western world, that's what they did. They're all doing that. This couple I'm telling you about, it's a Westerner. And they all did that. And do you know the biggest problem of their society today?
Loneliness.
Yes. So it's not going to work. That doesn't mean you stay with the most uncomfortable and most horrible people. I don't mean that. You don't have to go to the other extreme now. But you have to learn to live with people. Otherwise, eventually, you will find it impossible to live with yourself.
Very tough answer, but I have to really think about it. All right. One more quick question. We always say that service gives happiness. Unselfish action gives us happiness. Selfless, I'm not able to grapple because I have to understand that. But there are many cases where I've seen people who do service. I'm just giving an example for learning. I have people who are sick at home, and you have to have a caretaker. Now, the caretaker is doing utmost service, but the caretaker feels fatigued and sometimes unhappy. So this negates the statement, right? Service leads to happiness, unselfish. So how is that? This is something that was.
When the caretaker gets fatigued because there is no service. They're doing it for money. Are they doing it to serve? They're doing it for money. I'm not saying they shouldn't get money. I'm saying what are they doing it for? What's the intent? The intent is to get a salary. And that's what they're capable, those actions are what they're capable of. Therefore, they do it. But the intent was not service.
I'm meaning a family member. Even they get fatigued, right?
Yeah, even they get fatigued. They get fatigued because same thing, unselfishness is not complete. So that doesn't mean, of course, please be very careful in these things. That doesn't mean if a caregiver is fatigued, you say, see, you're not unselfish. I mean, who is, right? So you need a little bit of intellect there also to know that this human being is capable of this much and should not be pushed any further. So it's not like some fabulous level of unselfishness that we hold as an ideal. Which of us will be able to do it? But we must understand the cause as the cause. But now that it is what it is, you have to deal with it. Caregivers need care. Caregivers need breaks. Caregivers need all that because it is extremely taxing. However, if you see a mother, I know a mother with an extremely small child, like infant, she was so tiny. And she was born with, I don't know how many ailments. As a 13-year-old girl, she was the size, the 11-year-old girl, she was the size of, I mean, like a 5-year-old. She was so full of. Now, this mother spends her time looking after that child. She also does a lot of work for Vedanta, but she looked after that child so that till that child was 13 years old and that child was incapable of functioning, of doing anything by herself. 13 years she looked after the child, and then 13 years later, unfortunately, the child passed away. But she experienced no fatigue. I mean, she would go, to do Vedanta work like 10 to 1 in the institution. That was the rule that time. And so they would go, come, work, bring the child sometimes if there is no caregiver at home. Just completely dedicated to a cause and served the child. No fatigue. So, no fatigue means relatively less fatigue considering what she has to do. Everything. But the child was so sweet. I mean, such a cheerful and positive child you would never see. I mean, a child like everybody would love type of child. And full of problems. Like no day goes in that child's life without some problem, and growth is totally stunted. So basically, we have to recognize what level I am and give myself the appropriate thing. If I'm in first standard, I should not try to give a 10th standard exam. It makes no sense. So if I'm in first standard, I accept I'm in first standard and I function there and I function well there. So if a caregiver is experiencing fatigue, it becomes our role as society to help that person and not like say, oh, you're not unselfish. That's really cruel and hard-hearted because a person is doing something beyond their level of selfishness, which is actually a great thing. And that's why the fatigue is there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. First and third questions were answered. Second, I have to think about. Thank you so much. Hari Om.
So we studied how renunciation gives us success. Is everybody clear about this? Renunciation gives us success. You forget about yourself. You forget about your likes and dislikes. You forget about, no achiever has achieved something by saying, I am like that only. If you say, I am like that only, then you please stay where you are. You will have to force yourself out of that mold. Only then there is some hope of the expansion of the personality. Otherwise, stay content where you are. So, renunciation is the capacity to appreciate the higher so much that the lower is out of focus. Because it's out of focus, you simply won't do it. And that is what makes for the fact that you will become successful in life. हम ये नहीं करते, हम वो नहीं करते. If you keep on doing that, forget trying to achieve it. Just forget it. Alexa, somebody is not muted, so can you please mute yourself? It's Satsang host. Omkar, is that you?
Yes, Jankaji.
Go ahead.
So, Jankaji, my question is in continuation with Ganesh's question. Can I conclude this, that if I'm feeling fatigued in a particular work that I'm doing, I am probably not having the service orientedness towards that work.
No, not I am not having service orientation. I'm doing service beyond my level of selfishness, beyond my level of unselfishness.
I'm doing service beyond my level of unselfishness. Okay, then the other thing, the other aspect is the aspect of Swadharma. If I'm doing a job which is not my Swadharma, also I am likely to feel fatigued or frustrated in doing
more
something.
fed up than fatigued. You're fed up, right? You don't want to do this thing. You're fed up with it.
But often one encounters doing jobs that are not exactly their Swadharma, but probably they are in the line of their duty. So the question is, how does one bring the attitude of seva or service in something which is not their Swadharma?
You don't do those actions which are not your Swadharma.
But you don't normally, I mean, you don't always have that choice.
You do, you always have that choice. You are free to argue. I am free to say what I want. You are free to argue. Yes, you always have the choice.
For example, somebody might be working in the job that they don't, I mean, they don't like, only because the person has to feed the family. Like I think Pravesh had asked the last time. So how does one work that way? I mean,
you have to extricate yourself from that situation. You have to extricate from something, but you're not supposed to do those kind of activities.
there is no possibility of bringing that attitude of service in such work, even if it's not your Swadharma.
No, of course there's a possibility, but it is not a recommended possibility. You don't do anything which is not your Swadharma. Why would you do it? What makes us do paradharmic activities are desires which are out of control. Otherwise, why are you doing a paradharmic activity? Your own desires are out of your control, and that forces you to do a paradharmic activity. So don't do that. That's not a recommended thing at all. I mean, why is it not recommended? Just think about it. We already have like millions of desires. We already have that. As sadhaks, we are trying to remove those desires. Now I'm going to do paradharmic activity. That means activity for which I have no desire. The only way I'm going to do this is by, at some point, to make it comfortable for myself, I have to make that desire for myself. No. So it is a way of increasing desire. So I will not go there. Now, the problem is not in this. This is a very clear thing. The problem is to decide whether this is a dislike or a paradharmic activity. That's where the problem is. Because in my Swadharma, now your Swadharma is marketing. Now, in that Swadharma, there will be some things which you are forced to do which you don't like. Maybe like keeping accounts. You have to keep accounts. If you run a business, whether you like it or not, chak marke, you have to do that. Now you will have to do that. That you can't say, I will leave my marketing Swadharma because I can't do accounts. That you cannot do. So you have to do it. So it's a dislike now. It's not paradharmic. But you can, of course, employ somebody to do it in a more efficient manner. That you can do.
So the question is, how does one distinguish between dislike and paradharmic?
It's called an intellect. All discrimination is done by intellect, no? So how then you say, okay, how do I develop an intellect? That also you know. So everything you people know, now what shall I say? Okay, so anything else? Or shall we move on to how renunciation is bliss? People want these two things in this world. They want to be successful, they want to be happy. There are two things we want. Vedanta says the way to get them both is to have renunciation. So when we say renunciation, we say, oh, ye chodna hai, wo chodna hai. You don't get kya chodna hai. Kya chodna hai? We have to leave our likes and dislikes. We have to leave our ego. That's it. That's about it. There's nothing else to leave here. What are you going to leave? Can you leave eating? Can you leave sleeping? What are you going to leave? You have to leave your ego. You have to leave your likes and dislikes. Now, why will you leave your ego and your likes and dislikes? They are going to feel the most near, most dear, closest to you. So, what will make you leave it? What will make you leave it? That's correct. That's something that you want to do something greater. That is the only reason you will leave it. Nobody else will. Nobody will leave it for any reason other than the fact that you value something else more. Like a mother who's looking after a sick child, does she want to give up her food, her sleep, her comfort, her luxuries? She doesn't want to do that. Then why does she do it? Because she sees value in taking care of that sick child. So she is now willing to sacrifice everything about herself for that child. So renunciation is the greater value which you develop, because of which you do not do the lower things. I hope that's clear. If you're able to do this, you achieve success in whatever thing you have sacrificed your likes and ego for, and you also become an extremely peaceful person. Now, how is renunciation bliss? We are going to do that. So far, so good, everyone. So far, so good. Okay, great. Now, who will read the next paragraph?
I'll read.
Please.
There can be no peace, no happiness, unless you renounce your little self, give up your self-asserting ego, drop the idea of I and my, me and mine. E. Carpenter, an Englishman of great spiritual experience, says, "Never before could I have believed it, but I see it all now. There is no happiness unless you have clean dropped thinking about yourself. But you must not do it by halves. While even there is a least grain of self left, it will spoil it all. You must just leave it all behind and vouchsafe the personality and mind that much sympathy as to any stranger, no more, no less. Hence must you banish all attachment and anxiety. Brush aside fear of censure and hope of appreciation. Consider yourself as you would a stranger. Cast aside your cherished personal ego and pass disembodied out of yourself. Pass through the gate of indifference, through the door of knowledge, into the palace of peace and bliss. The Ishavasya Upanishad proclaims this truth. May you enjoy bliss through renunciation. So we can only find happiness when we have dropped a sense of me and mine. Even if we have any bit of identity with mindness, I-ness, we will lose this peace of mind. So we must drop a personal sense of ego and be only as kind to ourselves as we would to a stranger.
Right. So, where two important ideas, I think you've got the general gist of it. But two important ideas which you should underline, and I mean, not underline because it's the whole point, but underline because it's very important. One is that you cannot do this by halves. It's a very important concept. It seems like, oh, that sign line is just there. You should drop thinking about yourself. And we will try. Can't do it by halves. Why we need to emphasize that to ourselves is because that is really what we do. We do it by halves. Now, is you all of us over here, we do karma yoga, we do so much work, and then some sense of I-ness comes in, and that spoils the whole thing. So you can't do it by halves. You have to go the whole hog. As much as you keep behind, that much are you messing up everything else. Like, take an example, for instance. A lady does everything for her family, for her in-laws, for the extended family. She does everything. But let us say that she's a great gossip, or she's very arrogant, whatever. Some bad quality, let us give her. Very arrogant. Now, all the good work that she does for everybody will be forgotten, will be wiped out because of that arrogance which she has. And that's sad, isn't it? Nobody will see the rest. They will see the arrogance. I'm sure you must have experienced this in your own life. People who do a lot, but there's one negative thing over there which spoils everything. Some people do a lot, but they're great naggers also. So that little bit which you have left will spoil it all. So do not do it by halves. And then, just to make it easy for us, he's given us some examples of how we think of ourselves. He says, banish attachment and anxiety. How do we think of ourselves? When there's some attachment, when there's some anxiety, when there's hope that somebody might praise me, or there's distress because somebody has criticized me. All of this is back to me. Just have to let the concept of my identity go. Now, if you do that, you may turn out to become a doormat to somebody. You let people walk all over you. You let people treat you in any bad manner. So he says, no, that's also not correct. Give yourself as much sympathy as you would give to any stranger. Think of it like as if somebody else, okay? In somebody else's house, the maid comes whenever she wants, and the lady of the house has to keep adjusting to the whims and fancies of the maid. Does anybody agree with this situation? Nobody, right? Do you want this situation for anybody? Obviously not. So you don't have it for yourself either. You give yourself that much sympathy as you would give any stranger. So you have to balance between these two things. If you don't do to get this balance wrong, either you will assert your ego like too much, or you will assert your ego in negating yourself. So both are not going to work. There was a funny cartoon. I don't know if Mahesh ever sent it to you. He loves to send you cartoons in the newsletter he writes. So I don't know if he sent it to you, but there was some cartoon somewhere which was like, I am less egoistical than you are. I have conquered my ego better than you. I hope you understand the inherent contradiction of this thing. I am better at controlling my ego, something like that. It's an inherent contradiction, right? So, getting that balance right, I will give myself just as much sympathy or kindness or whatever consideration as I would give anybody. That is true egolessness. I don't treat myself any worse because there is an ego in doing that as well, no? That I am somehow worse than you. No, why? I will treat myself in exactly the same way. Now, how does all this manifest? He's told us the next concept of Bhoga and Yoga. This is all a manifestation of it. How you will experience it, should you do that. This first paragraph tells us that renunciation gives you peace. And then he's also taken the trouble to explain what is that renunciation. That you are able to give up all thought of self without leaving something baki over there. Pura ka pura. Right? So you don't have anxiety, you don't have attachment, you don't have any of these things. You also don't underplay yourself, but give yourself that much consideration, that much sympathy, that much kindness as you would give anybody. Right? So he told us how renunciation is bliss and renunciation is this. Now what happens? Let's see. Who will read the next para?
Valerie? I'll read. Yeah, Bhoga in Sanskrit means enjoyment and yoga means renunciation. People construe these two words as antonyms. Consider Bhoga to be opposite to yoga, but that is not so. If you study them carefully, you will conclude that they are not different. Bhoga enjoyment is nothing other than yoga renunciation. It may sound revolutionary, but it is the truth. There can be no real enjoyment unless you are poised in the mental state of renunciation. No sooner you renounce the arrogating ego than you become the personification of joy, happiness, bliss. You turn spiritual. The path to the Supreme Self, the way to the bliss of self-realization, is the crucifixion of the little self. Yeah, it's telling that Bhoga and commonly it is understood that Bhoga and yoga are two different words. And if you are in Bhoga, you cannot be in yoga. But here it's quite revolutionizing the things and telling in a very different way, very straight way that both are connected. Only when you are poised in renunciation, then only you can enjoy the Bhoga, because then you will do it with a detached attachment. That's what I think I understood by this.
You're muted, John.
Sorry. So what it's trying to say is that Bhoga and yoga are the same thing. Either way you look at it. If you are in Bhoga, you are enjoying something. The one thought which is not there is the thought of yourself. If the thought of yourself comes, you will say, oh, he is enjoying more than me. Like when you go to a restaurant, you order something, then some dish comes to the neighboring table. Then you say, oh, that fellow got a better dish than you. Will you be enjoying your dish if you think like that? The moment the thought of self comes, the enjoyment will go away. When you are enjoying something thoroughly, there is no thought of yourself at all. Now, if you can manage to get that no thought of myself in anything, not just in enjoyment, in anything, you'll have the same bliss. So, Bhoga and yoga are exactly the same. Happiness is always the same. It is the absence of agitation. Where does agitation come from? Because in some way you have thought of yourself. If you don't think of yourself, you'll never be agitated. Like for right now, nobody has any agitation. But suppose I suddenly say, Sahadev, tell me the definition of renunciation. Okay? Now, regardless of whether he knows the definition of renunciation or not, what has immediately happened? The moment I've highlighted somebody,
I comes into play.
agitation starts. Poor thing, he was sitting quietly by himself. Now suddenly, kya hua, kya hua? Why? Because the thought of self has been superimposed upon you. Otherwise, he was peaceful, right? You were peaceful, no? So far, Sahu Menon, you were peaceful, no? And unnecessarily mentioned your name and you started worrying ki ab kya hoga. Sudden exam mere upar aa gaya. So the moment the thought of self comes, agitation starts. So he's drawing a very, this is Ram Tirtha, he does all this. He's drawn a very beautiful way, I would say, very poetical way of saying that if that loss of thought which you had in enjoyment, you could have across the board, that same enjoyment you'll have in all things. And because that loss of thought of the self is the higher, that is yoga in itself. This pure action, right? It's yoga in itself. So whether it is bhoga or it is yoga, the only enjoyment is coming from lack of the thought of self. Otherwise, people can go to the mandir and start crying. No? Why are they crying there? Because they say, I want God, you've not given me. Why did you treat me like this? I love you so much, but you're treating me so badly. Whole Ram Katha, they will start over there. And they'll sit and cry. So the moment you're able to lose the thought of the self, you have bhoga and you have yoga. Yeah, Mahesh.
Yeah, so we are differentiating yoga and bhoga, but not bhogi and yogi, right? Those two are different. But bhoga and yoga is identified, but bhogi and yogi in the growth stages we do say bhogi, yogi, sannyasi, and jnani. So there's a little difference. So could you just explain that?
The differentiation there isn't what you're trying to do. A bhogi is called a bhogi not because he is enjoying something, but because he wishes to enjoy it. Remember, we studied that a materialist is a materialist not because he's wealthy or because he has a lot of material possessions, but because he values them, he wishes to have. A yogi is a yogi because he values higher values. He values it. Right? So when we're talking about that growth chart, Bhogi, Yogi, Sannyasi, Jnani, we're talking about what these people want. Is that clear?
So the Bhogi wants.
Wait, only up to this point is it clear?
Yeah. Now could you just explain the Bhogi? The importance given to sensual enjoyment is what the Bhogi wants, and the Yogi wants higher.
Yeah. What do you
higher
value?
ideals.
Correct. What do you
What do you
value? So
Okay.
when you look at a person, he has a Mercedes. And because he has a Mercedes, you value that person. You're a bhogi, you're a materialistic person. Right? So your value of that human being grew because he has a Mercedes. You know nothing about him other than the fact that he has a Mercedes. So now your value for him has grown. All right. Versus a yogi will appreciate somebody like Gandhi or Mother Teresa because say, oh, this person has done so much service or has been so sacrificial or something. That is why it's necessary for us to all have Mercedes. Because 90% of the world will value you for your Mercedes and not for your values. And if you need the world for any reason, you will have to deal with it accordingly. So those people who value you because of your wealth and your enjoyments, value you or anything, those are bhogis. Those who value you because of your service or your values or your understanding, those are the yogis. The sannyasi values you because
you are self-realized.
Identical. You're the self. Yeah.
Then the sannyasi will never value anyone because nobody's self-realized. The sannyasi
Because you're the self.
Because you're the self. Very good.
But bhoga is the enjoyment is identical. That's what this point is, right? Though
identical, no, because according to this point, the bhogi will never enjoy anything. He's not capable of enjoying because he's not capable of forgetting about himself.
So bhoga is only available to the yogi and beyond. I see. Okay.
That is the dichotomy of life, no? That the more you long to enjoy it, the less you actually do enjoy.
So the sannyasi values everybody and everything.
Right. It's got nothing to do with your personal characteristics. The yogi values you because you have got values, you're doing service, you're a nice person. Sannyasi is least bothered about your material equipments.
Okay, thank you.
Komal?
Yes, ma'am. I was a bit like I used to read Osho a lot, but one time. Now also I regard him a lot. But some of my friends, the other day, we were having discussion on this, and they said he fell from yoga to bhoga and criticizing a lot. So is it that he was misunderstood in this same way? That's why people are criticizing and telling him that he fell off because he was enjoying Rolls Royce watches and clothes and material world he was into so much. So people are misunderstanding him, and he was at same page which we are studying now. Is it possible?
I don't know him, so I cannot comment. I know nothing about the gentleman, so I cannot comment. However, just because a person has a Rolls Royce or a Mont Blanc,
Rolex watches
or whatever it is he has, that doesn't establish that he's a bhogi. It doesn't mean he's not a bhogi, but it doesn't mean he is a bhogi. It establishes nothing. We cannot establish anything from seeing his action. We will have to know his intentions to decide whether he's a bhogi or a yogi or a sannyasi or a jnani.
And that only he knows. Nobody else can.
No, not nobody else. He people of his level and higher will be able to tell. Of
Like
his
those who
level,
were close to him or those who are of the same understanding
same understanding,
will only understand.
will be able to tell. Everybody can tell their level and everything below. Nobody can tell higher than their level. Now, also, when it's our level and slightly above, we need some facts. So in the case of Osho, we have no facts. I mean, I don't have facts. If you have facts, I don't know. But just we're hearing that he had those gowns with diamonds or something.
Yeah.
I don't know why he had gowns with diamonds. I would personally.
He was into drugs and his sexuality was openly, so he was into Bhoga. That's what people criticize him for.
No, you can't. You can't make any statement about it. If he was a drug addict, then he cannot be into Bhoga. I don't know if he was a drug addict or not. He had open relationships. That is his personal whatever. I mean, why does anyone else have a view on this? I don't understand. If somebody wants to live their life in a particular way, that's their problem.
That's why you should be careful whom you are following, whom you are listening, what videos that person is not of a person, not of a kind that you should follow or listen to. That's what we were just discussing. So when this of Bhoga and yoga came, what came to my mind was, since he has so much of knowledge and he has on all scriptures, he has given his commentaries on, just by seeing a few things of his, we cannot say that he was not in yoga and he fell into Bhoga. So for him, maybe these two things are same. He was not having any personal sense. He was just enjoying it. He was living life. So I was trying to understand the thing a bit, nothing else.
You are putting intentions. You are putting intentions on him. Your friends are putting intentions on him. If you genuinely want to know, please find the facts.
Yeah.
We cannot just superimpose
We cannot say anything just like that. Yeah.
And secondly, you have to not worry about what the teacher does. You have to read a sentence and find out whether that sentence makes sense or not.
That's
what is it to do with us, what he does and what he doesn't do. That's his problem, not my problem.
Yes, for sure. Yes, thank you. That's what I believe.
So, clear about Bhoga and yoga. In the case of Bhoga, to actually enjoy, your sense of self has to be absent. If you start thinking of yourself, you will not enjoy that. Thinking of yourself doesn't mean you keep saying your name. It means you start getting attached, you start getting anxious, you think of anything. Your mind goes to anything other than the actual enjoyment. What he's saying is that if you're able to keep your mind in that manner focused on the actual action, every action will be the same Bhoga. So Bhogis never actually enjoy anything. It is the yogis who enjoy things. The yogis enjoy everything in the world. The yogis enjoy everything of a higher nature as well. Because they have access to it. The Bhogi has no access to it. And as you develop spiritually, you become calmer, more peaceful, more happy, regardless of external circumstances. Because whether you are in contact with anything or you are not in contact with anything, the same lack of self-thought exists. So the more you grow, the more you have Bhoga, in the sense, peace and bliss. It doesn't matter whether there's contact or no contact. The same beatitude continues. It doesn't matter whether there's a problem or not a problem. It doesn't matter whether the situation is a frustrating situation or a comfortable situation. You continue to have the same egolessness and therefore the same beatitude and bliss. Remember, so many years ago, some time ago, we thought we'd buy a property, but we had no property to buy and we had no money to buy property had we found it. Then over a period of time, we collected some money and we found a property. Then the property turned out to have so many problems. And then we were slowly trying to solve those problems, seeing whether we can buy it anyway. In the meanwhile, the The owners are saying, you people are taking too long, we don't want to work with you all, blah, blah. Total soap opera goes on. And finally, tomorrow, we are going to sign the MOU. A long journey to start the process of purchase. Now, in and through this ups and downs, someday we are buying, someday we are not buying, until we actually sign the MOU also, I don't know whether we will actually buy. Having signed the MOU also, there's all these conditions applicable. So if those conditions are met, then we will take possession on, we will do final payment and take possession on 31st July. Okay, at every point, like, it's a drama. Now, the big thing is, in and through all these things, do you feel exactly the same? Otherwise, we'll be dancing when we are buying and we are sobbing if that stops. So, it will be like a tumultuous up and down. That doesn't mean you don't feel the frustration of it going slowly, or you don't feel the exaltation of it actually working. But can you maintain a steadiness in and through all that? Life will throw so many things at us. Some days we will be successful. Some days we will be a failure. Some days people will think you're doing good work. Some days they think they're doing some stupid work. It's very interesting. And all of you must have experienced this at some time. We've gone to people, we've asked for funds. Some people praised us. They said, what excellent work you're doing. Some people said, what kind of work is this? Who's going to benefit from this? They were totally not for it. Some people said very many sweet things, but did nothing. Some people said very many argumentative things, but did something. Some people said sweet things and gave things. So many permutations and so many combinations. I'm sure you've all been through all of this. But can you maintain the same unaffected calm in and through it all? That doesn't mean you don't feel frustrated or you don't feel the exaltation when called for. But in either case, as far as you're concerned, it's okay. Success or failure, it's okay. All that we are concerned with is, are we doing the work day after day, step after step, point after point? That's all that counts. Now, if you can keep your focus on the work or in anything other than your own self, this will become
Yoga.
and
Your Swadharma.
Bhoga.
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 Will become Bhoga because you're enjoying. Now you don't need an external event or occasion to be in that enjoyment. You are as it is in that enjoyment. So I hope that's clear. Okay, let's start again. In an enjoyment, you will enjoy anything only if you don't think of something else. Correct? That you've all experienced. Okay, in a restaurant, if you order your own dish, you're free to order whatever you want. But the moment you order, then you see in the next table somebody has ordered something better. You lose your enjoyment. So the moment your thought goes away, the enjoyment is gone. Clear? So when do we enjoy? When the thought is totally focused there. So what we should learn from that is, what is causing me that enjoyment is not that contact, but the fact that my focus is complete. And if I can have that focus all the time on something other than myself, I will have this same enjoyment in all things. Therefore, yoga is equal to both. Komal, you have a question?
Yes, regarding this only, so it came to the mind that you were saying there will be ups and downs, there will be so many things going on in your life, like you also mentioned regarding purchase of land, but you are able to remain that calm and state of mind and all. But it is not possible when the down come, you do lose your peace of mind and calm. So how quickly you come back to it, that will decide, or you will how quickly you come back to that state of your being conscious, and that will decide your
That is a
success.
secondary. Yeah, that is a secondary one. Primary one is it hasn't moved in the first
Okay,
place.
you don't move in ups and downs. You're perfectly fine.
Peace hasn't moved. You can
Okay,
experience
peace.
sorrow without losing peace.
Okay.
You can experience joy without losing peace.
Deep inside, you know what is happening and why it is happening.
No, what is happening on? You are still peaceful. Both conditions you're peaceful.
Mm.
As long as you're maintaining that, it shows that you're not thinking about yourself.
But externally, you may feel, people may feel that you are disturbed, you are crying or something. You know what is happening to you,
They
and
don't
you accept it.
don't focus
You
on
accept
one
your
thing.
downs and emotional imbalance.
Talk slowly. Okay. We are not discussing what other people think of you right now. We are talking about your capacity to continue to feel okay no matter whether you're feeling upset or you're feeling exaltation. You are in your heart feeling okay about it. Of course, these emotions will be there. Now, let us say, for argument's sake, that you got affected, your internal peace did go. Then, second point will come that how quickly did you
Quickly you
come back?
come back and yeah. Got it. Thank you. Clear.
Yeah, Pravesh?
Ma'am, for the survival of fittest condition, is it possible to achieve complete renunciation?
Survival of the fittest depends on what you mean by the fittest. If the
Survival of the fittest means, as per the environment, sometimes we have to adopt or we have to do such things that violates our ethics. Means to fit into that environment.
So, what do you think a person of renunciation would do in that situation?
Yes, ma'am. That's I want to know.
You tell me.
As per the renunciation, first of all, we have to reduce our desires.
First of all, you have to reduce desires. That is the last thing you will do. How first you reduce desires? How is that even possible? How can effect come before cause? Reduction of desires is an effect, right? How can you begin with an effect? You have to begin with a cause. But anyway, at the you have to learn this as if you are learning a technical subject, not just jo bhi aaya man mein bol rahe hain. Can't be like that. So go step by step. Think it through. What does a person of renunciation? What is it that he has renounced? He has renounced his egocentric mind. That egocentricity of the mind he has renounced, right? So when he has renounced the egocentricity of the mind, he will take actions which are appropriate for the situation. What did Krishna do? We have to give up our ethics and all. I can't answer that because I don't know which ethic you're giving up for what reason. So what did Krishna do? Did he give up his ethics? He ran away from the battlefield. Did he give up his ethics? He created a big Mahabharata war. Did he give up his ethics? He played around with the gopis. Did he give up his ethics? He did all this, right? But we will never say that he gave up his ethics.
But justifying means satisfying others' arrogating ego is it justifiable?
Means what? Depends on what you're doing, why you're doing. Did not Krishna satisfy Balrama's ego? So go carefully and understand what each thing is. Just because you have to take up certain actions doesn't necessarily mean that you have given up ethics. You may have taken up those actions to preserve ethics. I don't know what the situation is, right? But the only point here is what will a person of renunciation do? Will take the most appropriate action.
Means
Why
for
did he not take appropriate action? Because I'm
means for achieving the higher goals, if some kind of hurdles that needs means violation of ethics is okay?
It's not for me to say, it's for you to decide. What is violation of ethics? How can I answer that question? Can I ever answer the question, is violation of ethics okay? Will I ever answer that as yes? Will anybody ever answer that as nobody will answer that as yes. The question is this a violation of ethics? That's why I gave you Krishna's example. He lied, he stole, he did all of this. Is it violation of ethics? You're not willing to say that, yes, Krishna violated ethics. Why are you not willing to say that? Because something in you makes you feel that kuch gadbad hai. Even though he did all these so-called unethical actions, they cannot be unethical. So then you have to figure out why. Why are you so against saying it? Why can't you say it? You're not willing, right? I said, easier. You will not answer that question. Why are you not willing to answer that question? You're like, oh, no. So think about it. What is it in him that makes these so-called unethical actions become ethical? Why am I not willing to say that he was unethical? Find out for yourself. Then you realize where that thing lies. The thing is, whatever he did, there's no desire of his own battle. He has nothing to achieve in any of that. He has no ego playing. He has no desires. And the moment
Krishna is another good example of Bhoga and Yoga. I'm sorry, I in between I spoke.
So because he doesn't have desires or doesn't have ego or he doesn't have hatred, every action of his becomes ethical. Okay. All right. So that's it for today. I already told you our big news. Tomorrow we are going